I never imagined my life would be reduced to a suitcase and a signature. After all the years I spent raising my son, loving him, sacrificing for him, I never thought he would look at me one day and decide I was too heavy to carry. Not because I was cruel or unkind, not because I demanded too much, but because, in his words, I had become a burden. I still remember the exact moment he said it. We were sitting in the living room, the same room where I once rocked him to sleep, where I helped him take his first steps, where I waited up late into the night when he was a teenager who thought rules didn't apply to him. He didn't look at me when he spoke. His eyes stayed fixed on his phone, as if what he was saying was no more important than a weather update. "Mom, it's getting hard," he said. "You forget things sometimes. You need help. I think a nursing home would be best." Best for whom, I wondered. I didn't argue. I didn't cry, not then. I just nodded slowly, because somewhere deep inside, I already knew my voice no longer mattered in that house. I had become furniture, useful once, now in the way. The day he took me to the nursing home was quiet. Too quiet. He packed my things quickly, efficiently, like someone completing a task they'd been putting off. I watched him fold my clothes I had worn while cooking his meals, attending his school events, sitting beside him in hospitals when he was sick. He didn't ask if I wanted to bring my old photo albums. He didn't ask if I was scared. He just said, "They'll take good care of you there," as if care could replace love. The nursing home smelled like disinfectant and resignation. Old people sat in wheelchairs staring at walls, at windows, at memories no one else could see. The staff smiled politely, but their eyes were tired. They had seen too many sons and daughters walk away pretending they were doing the right thing. My son signed the papers. I signed nothing. When he hugged me goodbye, his arms were stiff. He patted my back like one might pat a stranger. "I'll visit," he said. He didn't say when. I watched him walk out, my heart cracking with each step he took farther away. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was simply awake. The first nights were the hardest. The silence pressed against my chest, loud and suffocating. I lay awake listening to coughs from neighboring rooms, to quiet sobs from women who still whispered their children's names in their sleep. I thought about all the times I had gone without so my son could have more. All the times I defended him, even when he was wrong. All the years I believed love was a debt that would one day be repaid. I realized then that love, when taken for granted, turns into entitlement. Days passed, then weeks. No visits, no calls. I watched other residents receive flowers, cards, grandchildren. I smiled for them, even when my chest ached. Pride is a strange thing. It keeps you upright even when you are breaking inside. Slowly, something else began to grow in me. Not bitterness, not hatred, clarity. I began to observe, to listen, to remember. I was not helpless. I was not confused. I was not the fragile old woman my son had convinced himself I was. I still had my mind. I still had my memories. And most importantly, I still had choices. One afternoon, as I sat near the window watching leaves fall from a tree outside, I realized something painfully simple. My son had measured my worth by convenience, by how easy I was to keep, by how little I demanded. So I asked myself a question I should have asked long ago. What happens when the burden decides to stand up? That was the moment my story changed. I began requesting my old documents, bank statements, property papers, letters I had kept for decades. The staff was surprised by my sharpness, by my sudden interest in things beyond meal schedules and medication times. I smiled politely and said nothing. Let them underestimate me. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time since arriving. Not because I had forgiven him, not because I had accepted my place, but because I had made a decision. If my son believed I was a burden, then he was about to learn what a real burden truly felt like. And this time I would not carry it alone. Life inside the nursing home followed a rhythm that was both comforting and cruel. Meals arrived at the same hours. Medications were given with mechanical precision, and days blended into one another like pages of a book no one bothered to finish. For many, this routine became the end of their story. For me, it became the beginning of mine. I started paying attention to everything. Who visited, who didn't, who still received phone calls, and who stared at their screens hoping they would ring. I noticed how often promises were made, and how rarely they were kept. Children spoke of being busy, of work, of life getting in the way. But time, I learned, always reveals priorities. My son never came. Weeks turned into months, and still there was nothing. No birthday card, no holiday call, Not even a short message asking if I was alive. At first, I told myself he needed time. Then I told myself he was overwhelmed. Eventually, I stopped lying to myself altogether. I spent afternoons in the common room, listening to other residents share fragments of their pasts. One woman had been a school teacher who shaped hundreds of young minds, now forgotten by the very children she once taught. A man who had built houses with his own hands sat quietly in a wheelchair, his sons too busy to remember where he lived. Their stories echoed mine in different voices, all carrying the same message. Usefulness determines value in the eyes of the ungrateful. The staff began to notice me, not because I complained, but because I didn't. I read books, asked thoughtful questions, and kept my room meticulously organized. I requested access to a computer, explaining that I wanted to organize personal records. They were surprised but accommodating. That computer became my doorway back into the world. I reviewed every document I could find, bank accounts I hadn't touched in years, investments my late husband had set aside, just in case, and the deed to the house my son now lived in. I remembered signing it over to him after his marriage, believing it was a gift of love, a foundation for his future. Love, I realized, should never be unconditional when it comes to respect. As I worked through the paperwork, clarity replaced sadness. I wasn't plotting revenge. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply correcting a mistake, one made out of blind trust. I contacted an old friend of my husband's, a man who owed me nothing except honesty. Through him, I found a lawyer. We spoke quietly, carefully. Every word mattered. "You have more control than you think," he told me. "Age does not erase your rights." Those words felt like oxygen. I began making changes, small ones at first, redirecting accounts, freezing access, updating beneficiaries. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that I had handed over too easily. Meanwhile, life in the nursing home continued as if nothing had changed. My son remained absent, blissfully unaware. I imagined him sitting comfortably in the house. I once scrubbed clean with tired hands, drinking coffee at the table where I used to cut his toast into neat little triangles. The thought no longer made me cry. It made me determined. One afternoon, the nurse handed me a phone. "Your son," she said, surprised. I answered calmly. "Mom," he said, sounding annoyed more than concerned. "The bank called me. Something's wrong with the accounts." I smiled softly, though he couldn't see it. "Is there?" "They said access has changed," he snapped. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because," I replied, "you stopped asking how I was a long time ago." Silence filled the line. "I thought you didn't need it," he said finally. "You're taken care of." "I am," I agreed. "Just not by you." He hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because I had hurt him, but because for the first time I had chosen myself. I understood then that dignity is not something others give you. It is something you claim when you refuse to be treated as disposable. And while my son still believed I was safely tucked away, harmless and forgotten, the truth was this. The burden he had tried to abandon was standing back up, and soon he would feel its weight. The call from my son changed nothing. And yet, it changed everything. After that brief conversation, the silence returned, but it felt different now. It no longer pressed against my chest like a weight. Instead, it felt like space. Space to breathe, space to think, space to finally see my life clearly, without the fog of guilt that had followed me for decades. Days passed quietly. The nursing home remained the same. Wheelchairs rolling down hallways, televisions murmuring in the background, nurses calling names at medication time. But inside me, something had settled. I was no longer waiting to be rescued. I had rescued myself. Then one afternoon he came. I recognized his footsteps before I saw his face, heavy, rushed, annoyed. He stood in the doorway of my room, looking around as if the place offended him. His eyes landed on me, sitting calmly by the window, a book resting on my lap. "You didn't tell me you were changing things," he said immediately. No greeting, no concern. I closed my book slowly. "You didn't tell me you were leaving me here," I replied. He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, don't make this dramatic. I did what was best." "For whom?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He began pacing the room, talking about inconvenience, about bills, about how complicated everything had become. He spoke as if I were a problem to be solved, not a mother who had given him her entire life. I let him speak. When he finally stopped, I looked at him and said, "Sit down." Something in my voice must have surprised him because he did. "I want you to listen," I continued. Not as my son. As a man. He folded his arms, defensive. I raised you to be independent, I said. Strong, capable. But somewhere along the way, you learned that strength meant discarding anything that slowed you down, including me. That's not fair, he snapped. No, I agreed. It's honest. I told him everything then. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with clarity. I told him how it felt to be labeled a burden, how it felt to watch him walk away without looking back, how it felt to realize that love I thought was mutual had become conditional. His face shifted, confusion, then discomfort, then something close to shame. I didn't think you noticed, he said quietly. That, I replied, is the cruelest part. I explained the changes I had made. The accounts, the house, the legal decisions. Not as punishment, but as consequence. You took my security because it was convenient, I said. I reclaimed it because it was necessary. He stood up abruptly. So what now? You're cutting me off? I met his gaze steadily. No, I'm cutting the lie. He looked at me. Truly looked at me. Perhaps for the first time in years. I thought you needed me, he said. I did, I replied. And you needed me too. But need is not ownership. Silence filled the room again, this time heavy with understanding. I won't stay here forever, I continued. I'm choosing where I live next. And how? He swallowed hard. You're leaving? Yes, I said. Not out of anger. Out of self-respect. He sat back down slowly, the weight of reality finally settling on his shoulders. For the first time, he looked like the one carrying a burden. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said, his voice softer now. I know, I replied. But intentions don't erase impact. He nodded, tears threatening but not falling. Some lessons come too late to be gentle. When he left that day, he hugged me properly. It didn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it. And that was enough. Weeks later, I moved into a small apartment near a park. Nothing fancy, just peaceful. I filled it with light, books, and quiet mornings. I volunteered twice a week, helping children learn to read. They listened to me. They valued my time. My son called more often after that, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes sincerely. Our relationship changed, not restored to what it was, but reshaped into something more honest. I never told him I forgave him. Because forgiveness, I learned, is not a gift you announce. It is something you live. He once called me a burden. But the truth is this. I was never a burden. I was a mirror. And when he finally saw himself clearly, that weight was his to carry, not mine.